Well, good evening. Welcome to tonight. I'll let more introductions be done in just a moment, but I do want to say hello and welcome to Green Acres Baptist Church. My name is Cameron Ford. I'm the pastor here, and we're really glad to host this event. It's an exciting event to talk about scientists and their worldviews, to do so in this space and think about their faith also. I just had the privilege to meet Dr. Schaefer. I know you are excited to hear from him, and then Mark will come here in a moment to just introduce the organization and what tonight is about. But I thought maybe we'd have a little fun just off the bat. I'm curious of any pre-chem majors. Just raise your hand. No pre-chem? Okay, chemistry majors. Okay, we got some? No? They're not sure of their degrees or their majors, but I swore that I met a couple. Some engineers in the room? Okay, thank you. Okay, I thought so. Okay. Any other degrees that I might be missing? Microbiologist? Any other? Okay, thank you. Awesome. Okay, you're really going to enjoy tonight. Okay. Psychology, just curious. Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, you got those. And marketing, business. Okay, yeah, a couple, yeah. So see, we're all here, and this reaches in lots of different directions. Well, really, that's all that I have to say. You're welcome around the church. I do want to point out just some housekeeping. If you go out this door or even those back doors and make your way to this corner right back here are some restrooms. So if you need to slip out at any time during the night, there are men's and women's restrooms. Or if you wanted to go this way, we have some over this in this direction. But the best are this back corner here. So just slip right out there and find those restrooms, okay? I'm going to turn it over to Mark Wolf, and he's hosting tonight. He'll give you some more instructions and tell you more about this. Here you go.
Thank you. So as Cameron said, my name is Mark Wolf. I'm the director of the American Scientific Affiliation at the University of Georgia. So this is a new group here, so we're excited to kick it off tonight. The goals of the ASA are really twofold. First, we want to be a network and a organization that encourages Christians in the sciences. So if you are an undergrad, a grad student, a professor, someone who's just interested in science, who has a 9-to-5 job out in the community, we want you to be involved with this. Second, we want it to be a platform where we can discuss issues of science and faith and hear from a lot of prominent faculty at UGA, because there's many, many Christians out there who are at the forefront of this, and many people don't know that. So that's going to be two of our main goals. How we're going to do that is have monthly meetings like this. So we'll have a speaker who's invited, and we'd like to span a lot of different disciplines. So next month we should have a veterinarian professor who will be speaking here, and then there's the woman who's a director of the ASA who will be coming in November, and she's a famous aerospace engineer and an astronaut, so that'll be a really interesting talk coming up. So in order to stay connected with us, I asked you to do a couple of things. One, like our Facebook page, which is up there. If you don't have Facebook, we're going to pass around an email list, so please, everybody sign up on the email list. What we're going to do tonight, for everyone who signs up at the end, we're going to give away 6 of Dr. Schaefer's books. So please put your name on there, even if you're already like the Facebook page. Please write your email down, because we'll be giving these away randomly at the end of the night. And if you don't get one, these books are on Amazon, and they're a great book. So I highly suggest that you check it out if you enjoyed today's talk. So enough of that. Let me introduce Dr. Schaefer. So Dr. Schaefer is the Graham-Purdue Professor of Chemistry at the University of Georgia. He did his undergraduate degree at MIT, and then did his PhD at Stanford. And if that's not impressive enough, he started off his career at Berkeley. In 1987, he moved to the University of Georgia and became director of the Center for Computational Quantum Chemistry, where he's been till this day. He has numerous awards. I could bore you listing awards tonight, but I'm not going to do that. He's been listed by a website called The Best Schools as one of the most top 50 most prominent or influential scientists in the world. And just in 2019, by the American Institute of Chemists, he was given the gold medal, which is his most recent award, which is a really high honor for a chemist in the United States. So with that, tonight's talk is going to be about worldviews of famous scientists, which is a perfect kickoff for what the ASA is all about. And with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Schaefer up here.
Stay up here with me while I see if it works. Okay. Good evening. Am I electrified? I don't sound too terribly electrified. Am I? Okay, good. Let's see if things work here. Okay. Marcus said if I press this button, things will happen. Well, it did. How about that? Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, and I've got two, this screen and that screen to keep track of. So thank you for coming out on it is a pleasant night, and it's a good thing we didn't have it tomorrow night, or everybody would be doing some kind of activity related to the football game. So my talk is called The Worldviews of Great Scientists. I've been a member of the ASA for a long time. I'm not quite sure how long, so the worldviews of great scientists. Well, let's see. Let's hope this is going to get past the first slide. Oh, I see. Oh, I see what's happening here. Okay, I get it. Yeah, I have to do both of these at the same time. This is hard work. Yeah, this is hard work. Okay, so this is where we work. Center for Computational Quantum Chemistry. This is since we're in the football season, the football team paid for half of the cost of this building. That's a story that takes about 5 minutes to tell, but if you're interested, I could do it later on. So a great place to be, and we have several of our people here. I see Mark, of course, is one, and I won't name all the others, but it's good to see them. Okay, now, there's a picture of the group. Now, this picture was taken just before Mark joined the group, so he's not in here, but steady state, it's about 15 PhD students. You know, that's my job, is to try to get all these people through their PhD and get them jobs. Right, Mark? And get them jobs. I have two things to do: get them to graduate and get them jobs. And we try hard to do both of these things. Okay. Now let's talk about worldview. So at least people can see what I think a worldview is. Not everybody would agree, but I would say that everybody has one. I'd say everybody has their own experiences, and out of this form a worldview. Now I'm looking for my wife. Is she here, Karen? Oh, there she is. Okay, yeah, all right. I'm sorry, I have a lot of stories I can tell you about her, but they're not in this talk, which is good because she doesn't like to hear these stories. So everybody has one. Everybody has one. And what can we say about a good worldview? Well, I would say that a carefully thought out worldview reflects the deep hunger among human beings for meaning, for an overarching framework to bring unity to their lives. And I think this is universal. It isn't to say that it's always understood by people, but I think that everyone has a worldview. Now, we'll be talking about C.S. Lewis a little bit this evening, and this is his explanation of why he was an atheist from the age of 10. Oh, I see Buzz there. Buzz, how are you? Yeah, okay, so we have some friendly faces out there. Yeah. From the age of 10 when his mother died to about the age of 30, he was an atheist. And this is how he explained it. He said, "You'll understand that my atheism was inevitably based on what I believed to be the findings of the sciences." Oh, I have to keep both of these going together. This is challenging. And those findings, not being a scientist, I had to take on trust, in fact, on authority. He certainly was not a scientist. He had a classical education. He never had a single course in science in his lifetime. And somebody told him that science had disproved God, and he just swallowed it. Now, after he became a Christian, he met a lot of scientists who were Christians, and things changed. So let's talk some about the origins of modern science. Why not start out with Erwin Schrödinger, founder of wave mechanics, originator of the Schrödinger equation, the most important equation in all of science. Someone may have told you that E equals mc squared is the most important equation. Oh, they're wrong. There's not that much you can do with E equals mc squared. You can do a whole lot with Schrödinger's equation. H psi equals E psi. It describes quantum behavior of electrons in atoms and molecules, and this is in the Center for Computational Quantum Chemistry. This is what we do for a living. Okay? Yep. This is what he says. This is interesting. He says, I'm very astonished that the scientific picture of the real world is very deficient. Deficient. That's interesting. He says it gives a lot of facts, puts all our experience in a magnificently consistent order, but it is silent, ghastly silent, he says, about all and sundry that is really near to our hearts, that really matters to us. And he continues. This is from his little book, Nature and the Greeks. This is a book he published, I guess, about 32 years after he received the Nobel Prize. He discovered the Schrödinger equation in 1926 and got the Nobel Prize very, very promptly, just a few years later. Let's see what he says here. Yeah, he says that science cannot tell us a word about red and blue, bitter and sweet, physical pain and physical delight. It knows nothing of beautiful and ugly, good or bad, God and eternity. Science sometimes pretends to answer questions in these domains, but the answers are very often so silly that we're not inclined to take them seriously. It's a good bottom line for Schrödinger. Now, this is sobering, or it's intended to be sobering. This is an interview between Chandrasekhar, who in science always goes by that name and not by his first name, Nobel Prize in Physics, 1983, and his biographer. Wally is his biographer. And the biographer has spent a lot of time putting together this book, and he does a good job. The biography is good, but the thing that almost every review of this book, and there have been many of them, focuses right in on an interview that appears at the end of the book. And I think it's pretty interesting. He starts out, I consider myself an atheist. Okay, that's his beginning. He says, but I have a feeling of disappointment because the hope for contentment and peaceful outlook on life, these are the two great goals of the Eastern world. I think many of you will know the hope for contentment and a peaceful outlook on life as a result of pursuing a goal has remained unfulfilled. Okay, so he's describing a worldview that didn't really work. His biographer has been working on this book for 3 years and he doesn't get it. He says, what? I don't understand. And he continues. You mean single-minded pursuit of science, understanding parts of nature and comprehending nature with such enormous success still leave you with a feeling of discontentment. In other words, the biographer is saying, come on, let's get serious about this. You can't mean this. Well, he is not backing off. He says, I don't have a sense of fulfillment. All I've lived for, I didn't get. All I've done seems not to be very much. I have to do both of these things. This requires more talent than I have most of the time. If I get this one ahead of that one, just scream. Just scream and we'll get them right, okay? Now, so now Wally, his biographer, he's been working with Chandrasekhar for 3 years. And he says, okay, he's going to lighten this discussion. It's just too heavy. Don't you think everybody's got the same problem? And Chandrasekhar is not backing down. He says, well, it may be. But the fact that other people experience it doesn't change the fact that one is experiencing it. It doesn't become less personal on that account. And then his final comments, which are very sobering, should be very sobering to every young scientist, particularly those of you who are working 100 hours a week. I don't think, Mitchell, are any of our guys working 100 hours a week? He's not saying. They don't. They don't. I can get about 70 hours a week out of some of them, and that's kind of pushing the limit. That's kind of pushing the limit. Chandrasekhar, what is true from my own personal case is I simply do not have that sense of harmony, which I hoped for when I was young, and I have persevered in science over 50 years. The time I have devoted to other things is minuscule. This is really sobering. An atheistic worldview at the end of the day is not satisfying. Yeah, that's from the book. It's a good book, biography. Now, this is from a book by Alan Lightman. Alan Lightman, MIT professor. It's a good book. I'd recommend it. He did investigative reporter approach to the question of what scientists believe, and wrote it all down in this book, Origins, Lives, and Worlds of Modern Cosmology. He traveled all around the world and gathered up stories. And I'll skip to the bottom line here. Yeah, here we are. So we don't go on too long. He says, indeed, contrary to popular myth, scientists appear to have the same range of attitudes about religious matters as does the general public. So whatever a person thinks about God doesn't seem to be very sensitive to whether they have a PhD in the sciences or not. Eugene Wigner, one of the great geniuses in the history of quantum mechanics, born into a Jewish family in Budapest at the turn of the century, 1900, and found his way to America, thankfully, before horrible things happened over there, and found his way into a Christian community in which he felt more comfortable. Talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Now, I've had students who did not think mathematics was unreasonably effective. In fact, they've told me, I can't do anything with it. But if you're a genius like Wigner, Nobel Prize about 1940, you can do good things. And Wigner remarked that the miracle, talking about a miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics, I've got to be careful here, for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift that we neither understand nor deserve. And if language means anything when you're talking about a gift, there's something doing the giving in. To Eugene Wigner, the something was God. So we can ask this question many, many ways. And I will ask it several ways and give some possible answers. Why might a scientist become a Christian? Well, the comprehensibility of the universe points to a sovereign creator God. That's what Eugene Wigner is talking about. Mathematical physics made me do it. The laws of nature look just as if they have been selected as the most simple and elegant principles of understandable change by a wise creator. Belief in the decipherability of nature strongly suggests the existence of a cosmic mind who can construct nature in accordance with rational laws. Oh, well, we're going to bring back C.S. Lewis again because he's so quotable. And after he became a Christian, he never took a course in science. He wasn't that, but he became a little bit interested in science. And he understood a lot of things like this. He says, atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. Lewis is just a genius in these pithy statements. Blaise Pascal, we can talk about him a little bit. All these things that he did, dying at age 38 and got a lot of stuff done. Probability, statistics, on and on and on. I would say the only physical scientist to make profound contributions to Christian thinking. I'm not insulting the others, but I'm just sure they didn't get as far. Pascal's theology was centered on the person of Jesus Christ as Savior and based on personal experience. Oh, that's down there. Sorry. I could almost do it without this, I think. But then I'm going to be looking over there and looking over there and never looking at you. And I'm watching you all. I am. I can tell nobody's nodded off yet. That's really good. That's really good. If I'm looking over there, you can nod off and I won't be able to insult you. Yeah, this is from Pascal. God makes people, and this is from the Pensées, undoubtedly. Pensées, one of the great works of Western literature. Those of you who understand French will know that Pensées means the thoughts. The thoughts. This is a peculiar book. We had in our book club, Mitchell, were you in our book club when we did Pensées? Yeah, it's quite an interesting book. This is from the Pensées. God makes people conscious of their inward wretchedness. In his infinite mercy, unites himself to their inmost soul. Oh, I'm going ahead. Sorry. And conform to the image of God. And when that is fulfilled and God sees that they are conformed to the image of Christ, there can be no more condemnation. Jesus Christ is the end of all. Oh, I've gotten to Maxwell too. You know, these things, I'm going to have to decide on one of these and abandon it for the other. Let's see. Oh, there's Faraday. Let's see if I can do this without this. This will be, oh, no, I'm not connected to anything. Let's see if I'm just going to confuse myself if I'm trying to make both of these things go forward at the same time. Now, is there a sweet spot where I can see this and look at y'all? Well, Kelly, can you and your husband set an example and move over here? And the rest of everybody, too. If I could get you in the middle, I'll have a better chance. This might work. Y'all come over here. Yeah, okay, good. That'll be good. Plenty of room in the front seat and other seats, too. Okay, so we're going to try to do this without my trying to do two things at the same time. Michael Faraday, largely considered the most outstanding experimental scientist ever, period. What did he do? Discovering benzene was a minor accomplishment of his. Discoverer of electromagnetic induction, inventor of the generator, main architect of the classical field theory, on and on and on. Now, here's a story. I've given you a story about the approaching end of. Chandrasekhar died pretty shortly after he made that statement of not finding a satisfactory worldview. Just before Michael Faraday died, a well-wisher came to see him and made this statement. Faraday's almost dead. He says, "Sir Michael, what speculations do you have now?" Now, on first thought, this looks kind of unusual, but I don't know how many of you have spent time around people that are dying. I haven't done much of it, but there's this great sense, desire, I think, to try to find something to lighten the situation a bit. And so that's what he's trying to do. And in fact, this was Faraday's whole life, to make a speculation about some scientific matter, brilliantly design an experiment to test the speculation, go into the lab, see if his speculation was right. And Faraday's genius was such that whether his speculation was right or wrong, the outcome was very important. So not such a strange thing to say to Faraday. He says, speculations, I have none. I have certainties. I thank God I don't rest my dying head on speculation, for I know whom I've believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. And the first time I gave this talk, this is a pretty new talk now, but the first time I gave a primitive version of it, somebody was sitting in the front row, right about where this gentleman is, right here. Okay, is that your child right there? Boy or girl? Well, she is getting a lot of wisdom here at an early age. That is awesome. She'll be able to tell you about this as long as you live. There was somebody sitting right there who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He jumped right up and said, "You know, I've heard this before. I'm just so glad to know that Michael Faraday is the person that said this." And I was the one that had to tell him that these words were written down about 2,000 years before by the Apostle Paul. But these were the words that Michael Faraday closed out with. James Clerk Maxwell, the second of the three great theoretical physicists of all time. Isaac Newton, of course, who had a strong interest in Christian things. Maxwell, a determined Christian, and of course, Albert Einstein. Maxwell possessed all the gifts necessary for revolutionary advances in theoretical physics. A profound grasp of physical reality, great mathematical ability, a total absence of preconceived notions. The person that wrote this quote, this is from the Green Book, which is a book that gives 2 pages on the lives of all the great scientists. The person that wrote this book doesn't get it. If you go into the lab with no preconceived notions, you're going to get no results. You better have an idea. Now, your idea can be wrong, and that's okay. Faraday was made famous by a lot of the things he proposed that turned out to be wrong. But you better have some idea where you're going or nothing is going to result. So this historian does not get this right. He does get some of the things right, though. Creative imagination of the highest order, possessed also the gift to recognize the right task for this genius, mathematical interpretation of Faraday's concept of the electromagnetic field, his successful completion of this task, resulting in the field equations bearing his name, constitute one of the great achievements of the human intellect. And that is true. But you know, I and 900 other nerds at MIT, in our sophomore year, we all had to take physics. And when we got to Maxwell's equation, it was a little bit daunting. There are 4 of them, and they're not all that trivial. And we had one person in the class, kind of like Mark. Mark has an entrepreneurial spirit about him, if you don't know him. He's organized this ASA thing. I think it's going to be great. And this guy printed 900 T-shirts with Maxwell's equations on the front and Maxwell's equations on the back. And we took the exam in the basketball arena. We all took it in the same place. And you could see Maxwell's equations from any seat in the basketball court. And the professor was some German guy, and he was stomping around, goose-stepping around, and his face was so red, I thought he was just going to burst. He was really mad. The average on the quiz was 99%. So we really, well, you know, it's not, you have to be careful messing around with professors because the average on the second quiz was 17%. So we got him and he got us. But now they do that every year. So the first exam is a little bit harder than the one we had. Okay. Yeah, so Trevor Williams. Oh, this is from Maxwell, something he wrote. I think it's pretty good. It says, think what God is determined to do to all those who submit themselves to his righteousness and are willing to receive his gift. They are to be conformed to the image of his Son. And when that is fulfilled and God sees that they are conformed to the image of Christ, there can be no more condemnation. Pretty good clinching statement for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, over the front door of the old Cavendish and the new Cavendish laboratories in Cambridge is the same thing. In the old Cavendish laboratory, it's in Latin. In the new Cavendish laboratory, there aren't so many people that know Latin, so the same words are in English Cavendish laboratory where all the, there's so many stories I could tell you here. I've been on the tour of Cambridge before, and they take you to this old Cavendish laboratory, which is really not very big at all. Prizes came out of it, they tell you, 16 Nobel prizes came out of this little laboratory. And then, if you have a really brazen tour guide, he will tell you that's more than the entire number of Nobel prizes the nation of France has won. And there are always 1 or 2 people that leave the tour at that point, and the rest of us are just laughing. So, front door, old Cavendish, new Cavendish. I went the wrong way. Sorry. Yeah, there it is. The works of the Lord are great, sought out of all them that have pleasure therein. Oh, this is from Dalratch. Now, why is that not coming up? Oh, it is coming up again. This one, Mark, good night. It would have been a friend if I didn't have these things up here, but I think it's better to use these. I hope everybody can see. All right. Buzz, why don't you move up a couple rows? Come on. Be a role model. Yeah, come on up. And the rest of you guys in the cheap seats, too. Yeah, move up a little bit. Now, I need to get you close so you can read these things. Yeah, I can barely read it from here, and you're way out there in left field. Yeah, come on up, everybody. Good. That's great. Okay. He kind of summarizes in this book, Dalratch is a philosopher of science. He kind of summarizes what I've been trying to say, and probably better than I can say it. He says most distinguished scientists historically were Christians. Therefore, what may be said about those who insist that science and Christianity are incompatible? He's going to take a hard line here. He says, regrettably, we must attribute to such persons intellectual blindness, self-deception, or hypocrisy. Their implausible accusation of incompatibility would indict the majority of scientists who ever lived as not grasping what they were doing. Strong language. Here's a list of very famous scientists. The ones on the left-hand side are all with the Lord. The ones on the right are still living, and lots of Nobel Prizes in that list. And in the list on the right, I know more than half of those people. More than half of those people are my friends. So there are some great ones. Now, what shall we compare that with? Let's compare that with the Hall of Fame of the humanities. Okay? Let's compare that. The Hall of Fame of the sciences, most of them are Christians. Let's compare the Hall of Fame of the humanities. Let's throw Thomas Hobbes, Spinoza, Voltaire, Hume, Rousseau. You know something about all these people. Kant, Gibbon, Bentham, Hegel. This is the Hall of Fame. Emerson, Feuerbach, Thoreau, and Nietzsche. What about them? All of the above were either atheists, or nihilists, or agnostics, or skeptics, or scoffers, or cynics, utilitarians, transcendentalists, and so on. Not one of them a Christian. So the sciences do seem to be peculiarly, in its origin, Christian. Arthur Schawlow. Oh, he's not with us anymore. I love this guy. He was the most popular. Maybe one of the most popular professors at Stanford when I was a student there, and he always had a smile on his face. And Arthur Schawlow was approximately spherical. Not that tall, not that wide, about that deep. Now, some of you have been told that large people are unhappy. It's not true. He was the most joyful person on the Stanford campus. Just an amazing guy. And let's see what, Nobel Prize in 1981 identifies himself as an Orthodox Protestant Christian. And he says this: we're fortunate to have the Bible, and especially the New Testament, which tells us so much about God in widely accessible human terms. This was from a scientific interview, and the point he's trying to make is that what he did in laser spectroscopy was not necessarily widely accessible in human terms. And he draws the contrast with the New Testament. Oh, this is a letter to me from my friend Rick Smalley. Rick and I were friends from back to about 1976 or something, when he came to Berkeley and interviewed for a faculty position there, and we rejected him. We said he was too old. Of course, that was before ageism was illegal. He was about 33 years old when he began his professorial career. He'd done some other things first. And this is a letter in which he's talking about two papers which we published in a manner that is called back-to-back. The experimental paper and the theoretical paper, one after the other, because they really are working together for the same goal. Two papers, but working for the same goal. And Rick was very well known as an atheist, and he would say things to me like, "Schaefer, are you still a Christian?" "Yes, Rick. Are you still an atheist?" He said, "Well, of course I am." Until about 5 years before he died, when it was amazing. I mean, he was a rough, tough guy, Rick was. I liked him because the science was so great, and we had other things in common. But he was a tough guy, and he became a Christian, and everything changed essentially overnight. I've never seen such a rapid change as that in my life. And let me tell you what he says. He says he's going back to church. Oh, he's the father of nanotechnology. Nobel Prize, 1996. And this is what he says: "Recently, I've gone back to church regularly." He hadn't been to church in 40 years. He was positively dismissive of church and everything in Christianity. Gone back with a new focus to understand, as best I can, what it is that makes Christianity so vital and powerful in the lives of billions of people today, even though almost 2,000 years have passed since the death and resurrection of Christ. Although I think I will never fully understand, I now think the answer is very simple. It's true. So this is the most amazing change I've seen in the life of a great scientist. And amazing. We're going to skip that. I'm going to go too long. Is it C.S. Lewis? I keep bringing him back because he can say things so well. He says, men became scientific because they expected law in nature. And they expected law in nature because they believed in a legislator. I think that's so good. We'll let Bob go. Well, Bob Griffiths, he's a good guy. I know him. He's getting chronologically enriched, as am I. But he's a Christian mathematical physicist, highly, highly distinguished, and he says, if we need an atheist for debate, I go to the philosophy department. The physics department isn't much use. I think that's generally true. More Christians in physics departments than in philosophy departments. Okay. Robert White. Yeah, he organized a lecture for me in Cambridge a year and a half ago. Professor of geophysics, Cambridge, fellow of the Royal Society. That's a big deal. Royal Society of London. His work is on volcanoes in Iceland and New Zealand. And I showed this slide yesterday to my students in my freshman seminar, and I said, do y'all remember when Iceland was having these volcanoes that cost Delta Airlines millions and millions and millions because they couldn't fly across the Atlantic? None of them remembered. So this must have been a while ago that this happened. Anyway, Robert White was on CNN. He was on every kind of media at the time because he knew more about these volcanoes than anybody else. So, amazing scholar. He says, I can say with certainty that over the years, as my Christian understanding has grown, it has done nothing but fill me with greater certainty that the Christian gospel is truth that all the world desperately needs to hear, and that I am completely unworthy of the grace God has shown to me. Good statement. John Suppy, I know John Suppy, Princeton professor, had a similar experience to my own. I became a Christian during my 4th year as a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, and Suppy's experience is somewhat like that, and he's just a great, he does plate tectonics as well as anybody in the world. Began a long, lonely search for God as a Princeton faculty. Let me say, had some vague awareness of his spiritual needs. There it goes, my chance to influence the life of a 3.5-month-old child. She's gone. No, she's still back there. If I talk louder, she'll hear me. Yeah, okay. Maybe she doesn't want to hear me. I don't know. Began attending services in the Princeton Chapel, then reading the Bible and other Christian books, especially C.S. Lewis. He eventually committed himself to Christ and had his first real experience of Christian fellowship in Taiwan, where he was on a prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship. He felt like he had to go all the way to Taiwan to find some other Christians. Well, in fact, there's a vibrant group of Christians who are scientists at Princeton University. It just took him a while to find them. And this is something. He says, if you know the problems that human beings have, kinds of problems they have, pride, selfish ambition, jealousy, that's exactly the kind of thing Jesus talked about and came to resolve by his death on the cross. Science is full of people with very strong egos who get into conflicts with each other. It happens a lot. The gospel is the same for scientists for anybody else. Evolution is basically a red herring. If scientists are looking for meaning in their lives, it won't be in evolution. And on and on. John Suppy, good guy. Charlie Towns, I love this guy. We lost him about 2 years ago. He lived to be 99. Maybe the most influential scientist, experimental scientist of the 20th century. He lived to be 99 years old. Was just an amazing guy. And there's a certain sense in which I followed him around for a sense. He discovered the maser, which became the laser, in, I think, 56, 58. And when I got to MIT in 1962 as a freshman, he was the provost. I think, he had a brief case of the Nobel disease. Do you know what the Nobel disease is? You realize you've done it all. You know, you're not gonna get any more recognition than this. It's over. You got to decide something else to do. So decide, and he's a sweetheart. A guy decides to become an administrator, becomes the number 2 person at MIT, the provost, and he had that job while I was there, and he got the Nobel Prize during that period. And the year I graduated in 1966, he left. He hated administration. He said it was the most boring job he'd ever had in his life. Went back to science, moved to Berkeley, where he became right away the most famous faculty member on the campus, and never administrated anything else for the rest of his life. So I could tell you other stories about Charlie. They're good stories about Charlie. This is his statement. You may very well ask, just where does God come into this? This is from his autobiography. Okay, this is from Charlie's autobiography. Perhaps my account may give you some answer, but to me it's almost a pointless question. If you believe in God at all, there's no particular where. He's always there, everywhere. He's in all these things. To me, God is personally and omnipresent, a great source of strength who has made an enormous difference to me. And this is from his book, Making Waves. That's supposed to be clever. Now, I know you're not all nerds out there. If you're a nerd, you know that lasers are a wave-like phenomenon, and this is a way cool title. It doesn't mean he's I don't know if this guy's ever bragged in his whole life. He says, let me tell you a story about Charlie Towns. It's so good. At Berkeley, we had 5 professors on the thesis defense committee for all the young wanting to be PhDs. And 4 of these would be from your home department, in my case, chemistry, and 1 from another department, which is usually physics. And Charlie would appear in these things a couple times a year, and I was just amazed that he had time to do this, and he seemed to really enjoy what he was doing. And what would happen, sometimes students don't do very well on these exams. You ask them, do you remember Maxwell's equations? They say, well, I did yesterday, but not today. And the faculty are not, now some of the faculty are really mean. If we get a student that is really arrogant, like Professor Allen was, guys, like Professor Allen was, one of our professors at UGA, we hammered him. I mean, there was no letting up. When they thought they were smarter than we were, wow, there was no mercy. Anyway, that wasn't very typical. More typically, they were having a hard time. They couldn't get the particle in a box, the harmonic oscillator, or anything else. And finally, you ask them, well, can you tell us what 2 + 2 is? And the answer is, what would you like it to be? And at this point, Charlie Towns would come in and ask by far the hardest question. And the student would talk for 15 minutes, getting an absolutely brilliant answer. And I finally went to Charlie and asked him, how come you can rescue these students that don't know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide? And he said, well, this is easy. They have to come and ask me to be on their committee. And I tell them, if you're willing to take enough time for 1 hour to explain to me what you're doing, I'll be on your committee. So they would go in and tell them all the really cool stuff they'd done, which we hadn't asked them about at all. And they would give this amazing answer. So this is Charlie Towns, quite an interesting story. There needs to be a good biography of his life. At the age of 75, that's 24 years before he died, he was already a Christian, but he had a new experience of Christ, a deepening experience. Oh, this is Charlie again, from the same book. In my view, the question of origin seems left always unanswered if we explore from a scientific view alone. I believe there's a need for some religious or metaphysical explanation. He says, I believe in the concept of God and in his existence. And he talks about his life as a member of the Christian community in this book as well. John Polkinghorne, for 12 years, professor of mathematical physics at Cambridge. The system at Cambridge and Oxford until recently was very hierarchical. Just 1 or 2 professors of physics, 3 or 4 professors of chemistry, and so on. And Polkinghorne, when he was professor of theoretical physics at Cambridge, there was one other who was Stephen Hawking. And we're not going to talk about Stephen Hawking tonight. That's a different subject. But Polkinghorne, highly distinguished scientist. Oops, went the wrong way. Oh, did I? Here he is. He said, I take God very seriously indeed. I'm a Christian believer, and I believe that God exists and has made himself known in human terms in Jesus Christ. Alan Sandage, a great one. I don't want to go there yet. Sandage, probably the most outstanding observational cosmologist of the last, maybe the period between 1970 and 2000. There isn't a Nobel Prize for astronomy or cosmology. Once every 10 years they will give one, but the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, I'm in danger of knocking some of these things down. It's going to be all right. There's nothing valuable on any of these music stands. If a few of them go over, it's okay. $500,000 prize, the Crawford Prize. So this is big time. And he says that, this is interesting, he says the nature of God is not found within any part of the findings of science. Actually, I don't agree with him about that, but we'll let him go on. For that, one must turn to the scriptures. This is from this article in the New York Times. We could get into more details. He became a Christian at the age of 50, quite an unusual thing. I think I said I was 28 when I became a Christian. Becoming a Christian at the age of 50 it's not too late. Okay, it's not too late, but it's a bit on the unusual side. Oh yeah, this is okay. So here he's asked this question: can a person be a scientist and also be a Christian? This is a question that just keeps coming up over and over and over. Why did he become a Christian? Well, it should have been because he had observation time down in Chile, the Atacama Desert. One of these amazing, best telescopes in the world are in Chile. Where aren't they, Neri? Neri's from Chile. Yeah, way up high, 15,000 feet, 500 meters. There's no atmosphere up there. There are places in the Atacama Desert where it's never rained, and you don't get days of telescope time. So he came outside, looked around, walked around, and just looked up in the heavens and said, "Wow, this is just way too good to be an accident. I'm going to become a Christian." That's not what happened. He says, "Biology made me do it." Look at this. This is good. It says, "The world is too complicated in all its parts and interconnections to be due to chance alone. I'm convinced that the existence of life, with all its order and each its organism, is simply too well put together. Biology made me do it." George Ellis I know pretty well. We submitted a grant proposal together. It was rejected in the first form, but we'll get the money eventually. It's just, sometimes you have to try a couple of times to get this money. I met him, he asked me to lunch in Cape Town on the waterfront. This is probably 7 or 8 years ago. And then my wife and I met George and his wife in Munich summer before last, I think that's right. And we're finishing this grant proposal. An amazing person, George Ellis. Amazing person. Co-author with Stephen Hawking on the only purely scientific book that Hawking ever wrote, The Large-Scale Structure of Space-Time. It was bestseller, 2,000 copies. So, when you write a serious scientific book, you don't expect to make a lot of money. Also, courageous opponent of the apartheid system. He was known worldwide for opposing this South African system of almost slavery. And when I met him the first time, I said, "George, how'd you stay out of jail?" He said, "Well, it was kind of my idea that being in jail wouldn't help me that much. It wouldn't improve my scientific work all that much, and it probably couldn't oppose the party. So I would go right up to the point where they were about to put me in jail, and they wouldn't do it. Of course, part of the reason they didn't put him in jail is because it would have been embarrassing. Yeah, to have this great scientist be put in jail would not play well among most anybody. This is his thing. He says, "God's nature is revealed most perfectly in the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, as recorded in the New Testament." William Phillips, Nobel Prize in Physics, 1997. Hope this is going to go forward. Methods to cool and trap atoms with laser light, very low temperature laser physics. The day the Nobel Prize was announced, he was at Long Beach for a scientific conference. I'm sure it was on the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary is this ancient ship that got retired, and they have scientific conferences there. I went to a scientific conference on the Queen Mary, Long Beach. Long Beach is not the nicest part of California. And I'd never been on a cruise ship before, and haven't been on one since. But I got on, and so I got a nice pair of swim trunks to go with me, and my jogging shoes and everything. I get on this ship. I mean, there's no swimming pool. There's no running course. This thing was built in 1920 or so when people didn't have any interest in those things. So it was the conference was good, but it was really a boring place to stay. The cabins, the rooms were about 8 foot by 8 foot, and the ceilings were about 6 foot high. So anyway, it's a famous ship. He said, excuse me, God has given us an incredibly fascinating world to live in and explore. Now, that's on the front page of the New York Times. On page 8, where they give the details, it says that 48, when he got the Nobel Prize, forms and sings in the gospel choir of Fairhaven United Methodist Church, a multiracial congregation of about 300 in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Also teaches Sunday school and leads Bible studies. He's quite active in these things. And the other thing it says on page 8 is that every Saturday afternoon, with his wife, they go into inner D.C. It's about, Gaithersburg's about 25 miles north of D.C. And they know, at that time, 80-year-old African-American woman, widow, and they would go with her, help her get her shopping done, and then they take her out to dinner. So there's some genuineness in this. This is not all words. That one's about to go. Don Page, I love Don Page. What a guy. I mean, talk about nerd. I mean, we're all nerds, Mitchell, Neri, Mark, you're nerds. I mean, but Bill Gates said nerds have taken over the world. Jared, it's okay to be a nerd. It's okay to be a nerd. Don Page is probably the nerdiest nerd I ever met. I mean, he's just amazingly nerdy. He is Stephen Hawking's most famous student and perhaps the closest personal friend of Stephen Hawking. And they didn't agree about everything, though. Page made this statement, which has made the rounds. This statement appears in a number of places. I'm a conservative Christian in the sense of pretty much taking the Bible seriously for what it says. Of course, I know that certain parts are not intended to be read literally, so I'm not precisely a literalist, but I try to believe in the meaning I think it is intended to have it. And I wanted, after I gave a lecture, not this one, but an earlier version of another lecture on cosmology, and he said, we finished at 12, and I'm getting hungry, and he said, Schaefer, come into my office. I want to ask you a few things. So I went into his office, and we were in there for 5 hours. There was no lunch for me. It was, and he started talking, and it's like he's spiraling into deeper and deeper and deeper things. And at one point I said, well, Don, I've got a question for you. When you say you don't take all these things literally, what do you mean? And he looked at me in amazement and said, Schaefer, don't you understand this? Do you think that the psalmist talking about God spreading his wings over his people means that God is a big chicken? I said, no, that hadn't occurred to me. I said, but we have a big chicken in Marietta. I said, but we have a big, now this is going to show the local people from the other, that big chicken it's just awesome. It's just awesome. And it used to be the case when we came here 32 years ago, everything in Atlanta was based on how far it was from the big chicken. So I could share with Don a good bit about the big chicken. And he appreciated it, I think. It was a little light for him. I said, Don, give me something that nobody's ever seen before that I can use talking to students. And he said this. He said, the universe is basically very simple. The theological implications of this would need to be worked out. Perhaps the mathematical simplicity of the universe is a reflection of the personal simplicity of the gospel message that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to bridge the gap between himself and each of us who have rejected God or rejected what he wants for us by rebelling against his will and disobeying him. This is a message simple enough to be understood by children. Chris Isham, another very famous quantum cosmologist. In fact, Paul Davies, a brilliant writer about science, author of a book called The Mind of God, and many others. And before it became so popular as an author, he was a cosmologist, and he claimed that Isham was Britain's greatest quantum gravity expert. Now, given that that's what Stephen Hawking does for a living, that's a pretty strong statement. We don't have to accept that. Isham organized a lecture, a different lecture with this one again at Imperial College, and finished at noon. Now, this is after I'd had this horrible experience with Don Page where I starved to death. He says to me, "Schaefer, can you come into my office? I have a few questions for you." And I'm thinking, oh no, are we going to do this again? And after an hour, he said, "Okay, that's it." We went to an amazing Indian restaurant not far from the university and had an excellent lunch. So I avoided that, having to do that horrible thing twice. I'm getting pretty suspicious of these quantum cosmologists. And I said to him, "Give me something really good that I could share with a group of students." He says, "The God of Christianity is not only the ground of being, he is also incarnate in the person of Jesus Christ. Essential therein is the vision of the resurrection of Jesus Christ as, quote, the new creation out of the old order, and the profound notion of the redemption of time through the life and death of Jesus Christ." Now, this last sentence, be cautious. Be cautious. Before I even read this, I'll tell you to be cautious about this, because you could be deceived. I think it will be a rather long time before theoretical physics has anything useful to add to that. You might go, "Oh, he doesn't think theoretical physics is very important." He is passionate about theoretical physics. He has committed his entire professional life to theoretical physics. But what he's saying is what he's found in Jesus Christ is more profound. Paul Ewart, professor at Oxford. This is what he does. Research uses lasers to do molecular physics, quantum optics, nonlinear spectroscopy. These are all wonderful topics. And this is what he had to share. Christianity, however, makes far more sense than atheism. Well, that's a strong starting out. First, it makes sense of our rationality. Its source is ultimately God. Second, it makes sense of morality. God provides the ultimate reference for what is good. Third, it makes sense historically. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ is evidence that he was the Logos, the Word made flesh, that is, God expressing himself in human form. Jim Tour, oh, I love this guy. Yeah, he's been here before, too. Jim has been to the University of Georgia to give the Mulliken Lecture and to speak at the annual gathering of the American Chemical Society, and to speak to a bunch of people on science and Christianity. Amazing guy, author of many very famous papers, recipient of the ACS, American Chemical Society Arthur C. Cope Award, on and on and on. Am I going to say any more about that? Yeah, authored the second most important paper in all of science, 2005. And here's what Jim has to say. This is his website. This is not a part of Rice University where he's a professor. jmtour.com. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, take a look. This is an amazing website. "I was born and raised a Jew in New York City area, and I remain a Jew. In November of 1977, while a student at Syracuse University, I came to the realization that Jesus Christ is the Jewish Messiah. I asked Jesus Christ to forgive me for my sins and to come into my heart." He's bold. He's bold. Karen and I get some of his newsletters, and they're just amazing. They're just amazing. If you're interested in that, I can tell you more. Kees Dekker, nanoscience pioneer from Holland. We have a lot of Europeans in this lecture, but I'm running out of time here. And I mean, there's not a lot, Thursday night, there's not a whole lot else to do except study. Or do research, guys. I expect you to go promptly from here back to the lab. back to the lab. Case Decker, he's a good guy. I know him well. And this is his statement. In the Christian worldview, I've discovered a grand story in which many things fall into place. Life has a purpose. The human mind is not an illusion, but real. A universal moral exists and derives from God. Relations with God and our neighbor are most important. Science is a fantastic activity to explore nature for which we can honor God. History is a linear process that started with God's creative act of the Big Bang, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then he says, also at a personal level, so he brings this down to our level, I have found that living with the living God, Jesus Christ, makes my life utterly fulfilling. Andrew Briggs, so a lot of Oxford and Cambridge professors here. They're great ones. Quantum information processing. This has become a big deal. This is quantum information processing. This is quantum computing, basically. He was doing this before it became so famous. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure it's going to work, but it's big news. So this is what he does: carbon nanomaterials and so on. And this is his statement. He says the fusion of the worlds of information. That's what he does. And the physical world. So all these people are trying to make some connection between what they do as scientists and their Christian faith. The fusion of the worlds of information and physical world should not come as a surprise to the Christian believer. This was foreseen in the Old Testament, where the Word of God often has the prophetic properties of something that is effective in the world. In the opening chapter of the Gospel, John describes how the Word, Jesus Christ, became physical. This is a great example, but I don't have time for it. And I wish I had. If we are allowed some questions, ask me about this. But this goes on for a while. But it's probably one of the best of all these things in terms of establishing a worldview with both as a scientist and a Christian. Yeah, this is so good, but it takes too long. Okay, Gerhard Ertl, Technical University of Berlin and the Max Planck Institution there. We had a bunch of our students in Germany this summer. 2007 Nobel Prize, studies of chemical processes on solid surfaces. He was asked by a skeptic if he was a Christian. And he responded, I believe in God. I'm a Christian. I try to live as a Christian. And do you notice he's got those two things separate? Being a Christian is the root. Living the Christian life is the fruit. I read the Bible very often. Fine-tuning the universe. I think we're going to let this go. Oh, sorry to see John Barrow go. Good guy. Now, yeah, I'm going to skip a lot of things here. Oh, I'm not going to skip this, though. Francis Collins was a professor in the biological sciences at the University of Michigan, discovered the cystic fibrosis gene, and then went from there to become the director of the Human Genome Project. And when they got their first results, he and I think Bill Clinton was the president at that time, went before the press, and he made this statement. He says, it's humbling for me and awe-inspiring to realize that we have caught the first glimpse of our own instruction book, previously known only to God. And yeah, this talks about what he did. A little bit more. Why might a scientist become a Christian? Biology, extraordinary complexity and high information content of even the simplest living thing points to a sovereign creator God. Yeah. This talks about Collins. This is a great. Maybe I will read that. I'm almost done. I must be almost done. Yeah. Mitchell's nodding. Yes, you must be almost done. Mark's saying these people are never going to come back after this. Hey, y'all, we didn't start till 10 past 8, so it's not as bad as it looks. There was a lot of monkey business that went on before I got up here, mostly trying to make all these gadgets work. Collins describes his own experience much similar to mine. Fortunately, through the guidance of some very patient people who tolerated a lot of insolent questions, I was led to read C.S. Lewis. Here we go again. And then the Bible, and I was led to understand many of the concepts that had completely eluded me before, and I gave my life to Christ 20 years ago. He's about the same age I was when he became a Christian. Simon Conway Morris, famous paleobiologist, and this is his statement on all these things. A statement on something that's very important to him. He says, concerning the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he says this: forget the libel. This is something he's heard among students and faculty at Cambridge. Forget the libel about the first Christians being credulous peasants and hysterical women. They were hard-nosed individuals, far more familiar with the realities of life than most of us, certainly far more than most Cambridge University students and professors. They live a pretty easy life. What was happening was simply incredible. You hardly have to read between the lines. All this crystallized in the resurrection. In those few years of Jesus' ministry, a reliable history can be reconstructed. Good statement. Yeah, I'm going to finish this, okay? I'm going to finish this. I gave this talk in India last December. Yeah, it was the Dalai Lama and me. Yeah, there's a big thing in IIT Bombay called Tech Fest, and they invite some speakers. And I was, Dalai Lama was, of course, the lead speaker, and he was in a different auditorium from me, and I was in a big auditorium right next to him. The idea was he was going to speak first, then all the Dalai Lama's crowd is going to come over and listen to me. Well, just like here, AV didn't work, and Dalai Lama woke up late, and he started his lecture the same time I started mine. So he had 1,000, I only had 400. So it's tough competing with the Dalai Lama, I can tell you. But I wanted to have something that I could take to India with me. I have many Indian friends who are Christians, and I wanted to be clear they got that. So I'm quoting Praveen Sethaparthi, a young professor at Cornell. This is his research, DNA. He says, I am a genetics professor with a Hindu background, Indian ancestry, and Christian beliefs. And then here's another one, Washington University, St. Louis, Joshua Swamidas. This is what he says. This is about his research. He's a computational biologist. Some of my former students are computational biologists. It's somewhere between biology, chemistry, and medicine. He says, I'm a scientist. Still, on earth every year, I celebrate that Jesus rose from the dead nearly 2,000 years ago. This event in first century is the cornerstone of everything. And that is what I wanted to, well, maybe I'll say one more thing. Why not? You've been very patient, and I have not taken much more than an hour, Mark. I have not. How can I summarize this talk? I'll try to do it, okay? In one or two sentences. During the fourth of my 18 years as a professor at Berkeley, Jesus Christ came into my life. My life had a purpose to know Jesus Christ and to make him known. C.S. Lewis's autobiography of his early life is called Surprised by Joy. And I have had that experience too. There's a great, great joy in Jesus. Thank you very much.
We'll do one or two questions, if that works, if anybody has any. Come on, somebody has to have something.
Well, okay. There are some people in academia who are very anti-Christian. Richard Dawkins is in fact, there's an annual prize, the Richard Dawkins Award for Atheism, that is given. They gave it to him first, and he is, and there are others too. It's not so much that Dawkins doesn't believe in God, it's that he doesn't like God. Not so much that he doesn't believe in God, that he doesn't like God. And he debates many people, and when he debates Christians, like my friend John Lennox, he just gets killed. When he debates William Lane Craig, another friend of mine, who's, you come into contact with a little bit, he gets killed. So he's not a very good debater because he gets so mad. And these guys are so calm, and there's just a joyfulness that just comes from William Lane Craig. And there's some of it out there, and they try hard to publicize it, but they're in the minority. A number of scientists who are atheists are in the minority.
Any other questions?
Almost all of the quotes that you put up there were, so simple. And, just coming from just these super hype scientists that are obviously way smarter than I am, why do you think that all of their answers about God, about Christianity, why do you think they're so simple?
Well, some of them are simple and some are not. I tried to put together some things that are different. I hope they weren't all the same. Certainly, they're all, well, a quarter of them are focusing on the resurrection of Jesus Christ because this is the main event in history. So there's a lot of focus on that, but there are other things. I'm going to show you this thing that I didn't show you. Okay? This is different. Ready? Oh, did it die? No, it didn't die. Yeah, this is just 2 minutes. Okay? This is different. Okay, I'll get to it. This is, I'm getting there. I'm getting there very fast now. Yeah, Jörg Lutow. He organized 2 different lectures for me at Karlsruhe, one year and then another few years later. And he's chaired professor at the University of Karlsruhe, and he made his reputation in the USA at the old Bell Telephone Laboratories, which doesn't really exist. It used to be a very elite scientific laboratory. The telephone company got split up, and so it disappeared. But known for his pioneering work in the field of photonic communications, and in particular for ultra-long-haul telecommunications. So let's see what he says. He says, if God were not to exist, then a human being, with his or her ability to think, sense of fairness, and awareness of one's own self, necessarily could only be explained as a coincidental arrangement of atoms, molecules. Thus, the whole process of thinking, the sense of justice and self-awareness could only be explained by an interaction of electromagnetic waves with matter. This is what he does for a living, studies the interaction of electromagnetic waves with, this is his thing, okay? So he's trying to relate to what he does. He says the notion that electromagnetic wave-matter interaction theory, which he knows more about than anybody else, can explain human consciousness is bold because physical laws are neutral to any emotions, judgments, and creativity as would be needed to describe a human being. Also, such a theory, if successful, would not leave any room for personal decisions because we'd be governed by physical laws and quantum mechanical probabilities rather than by freedom of choice. And then he's going to give his own pitch here now. So the biblical view, according to which a human being is both a physical and a spiritual being, is in agreement with my scientific view and best describes my personal convictions. Many of the biblical stories comprise a wealth of truths that are invaluable for our daily relationships and other people, but also with God. However, most importantly, I've had the privilege to spiritually experience the reality of the biblical God. So now I can say I know the purpose of my life. So yeah, he's trying to relate these things. I think he does a good job. I'm coming back down here. I hope I don't fall down.
All right, one more question. Actually, we'll take these two.
So you study philosophy in your life. What is it that brought you?
I wasn't a Christian growing up, but I have to say I was never an atheist. I mean, even as a little kid, I remember waking up, going outside on a beautiful day and saying, this just doesn't look like an accident. So I had a vague belief in God as far back as I can remember thinking about such things. I wasn't a Christian, but on Easter Sunday of 1969, Karen and I went to a little church right across the road from the Stanford Linear Accelerator, and the minister was an Englishman, John Burns, and he gave a sermon that began with the following words. He said, this whole business of Christianity is a sham if Jesus didn't rise physically from the dead. And that got my attention. And after Carter and I hung around, church emptied out, I went up and said to him, I thought the first sentence of your sermon was pretty interesting. He said, well, what about the rest of it? I said, I wasn't paying any attention. I was just thinking about the first sentence. That was enough for one day. And I said, do you really believe that Jesus Christ rose physically from the dead? He said, yes, I do. How about you? I said, well, I don't know. And he suggested some things for me to read, and that led to a long period of reading and studying until I became convinced that the resurrection of Christ is not only true, it's one of the best attested facts in all of ancient history. And then it was still another year before I became a Christian, but God brought me over the line. Yeah. That's a good question. Why is it that Nietzsche and on and on and on and on and on were atheists? It's hard for me to give an answer without insulting the squishy heads in this audience. You know, at the university, we have the two great efforts, the nerds and the squishy heads. It's hard to answer this question without getting myself in trouble with the squishy heads. I do think that scientists are more grounded in reality than sociologists are. I've made 15 enemies right there, but that is my opinion. You know. Just for the record, my wife is a squishy head. And we have been married for 53 years now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so before we head out, I just want to say thank you for everyone who showed up today. Please stay in touch with the Facebook group or emails. We'd love to see you at more events. Please share them around because I don't have very many friends here, so it's hard for me to connect with people. That wasn't a joke. And so it'd be great and connect with friends, especially when these talks reach out to people who are in those disciplines. And you don't have to go to all of them, but please come to the ones that really interest you because there's a lot of great stuff that we'll try to bring here. Before you go, I did a random number generator to select who gets these books, and I don't know anybody, so you can trust me on this. I didn't pick any of my friends. So I'll read the names, and you can come up here and get your book. Leela Fanst. Yeah. Olivia Nail. Oh, man, I'm going down the whole road. Rebecca Benson. Okay. Dorothy Booth. Zach Wheeler. And Liua Jiang. It looks like Lihua. Perfect. There you go. Yep. All right, and if you didn't get a book, that book is available on Amazon. Just Google Dr. Schaefer's name. It's on his website with his bio too, so please take a look for it and order it if you found this lecture interesting, because it's from a whole set of lectures that are related to topics like this. So thank you, and everyone please have a great night.